Hi, so in this video we're going to take a look at point of view, how it's set, why it's important, what difference it makes, and what the current state of affairs is on PS4 as a console. So just kicking off here, this is Project Cars 2, and I just want to show you the difference that changing point of view can make to what you're seeing and how you're driving, because a lot of people dismiss it and it is quite important. Now I'm just going to drop into the settings here, so options and camera, and what we can see is I've got my cockpit and helmet camera here set to 52 degrees. Now this is horizontal, 52 degrees horizontal. Most titles use a horizontal measure, but you can get some, such as Assetto Corsa, which we'll look at shortly, which have a vertical one. But basically it's the degrees you can see either across a horizontal axis or a vertical axis, and 52 degrees. Now that's what I've set based on using a 50-inch screen, and I think I'm sat about 60 inches away from it. It gives me around about 52. There's a calculator I use that I'll pop a link to in the description down below. Now you can get away with playing around with your field of view by around about, plus about 4 or 5 degrees based off the recommended setting, depending on what's comfortable. But if you go much further than that, what it then does is it really screws with your sense of perspective. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to change this from 52 all the way up to 120 and hope it's the cockpit cam I'm using. We'll soon find out. Yes, it is. Right, so there you can see that's 120 degrees field of view. Now what you can see is I can see the cockpit absolutely brilliantly. I've got a massive wide field of view here, but if you have a look, it looks like Eau Rouge and here at Spa is a million miles away as a result. And what this does, it also, you can see it looks a lot lower and flatter. So by setting a wide field of view, you get a really good sense of speed, gives you an amazing sense of speed, but what it does is it flattens everything out. So elevation changes appear much smaller than they are, and bends and curves appear to be much more open than they are. So it opens up corners, and this can cause all sorts of problems. It can throw out your braking points massively, it can cause you to not apply enough lock when you get into apexes, etc, etc. So what if we then look at the other end of the scale? So setting this all the way down to its minimum in this case of 35. There we go. So let's come out of that now. And as you can see, it now looks as though I'm right on top of Eau Rouge, and everything looks far steeper and corners appear far tighter than they should be. So the reason why it's important to get your field of view as accurate as possible is it just makes driving a hell of a lot easier. It really does. You get a much better sense of corners. They feel more natural in terms of the amount of lock, particularly in relation to the track map. If you have a look at the track map, Radeon, which is what you have before Eau Rouge, Radeon's actually quite a gentle intro, but here it looks ridiculously tight and steep. So what you want to do is use a calculator and then basically set your field of view to whatever is most accurate from the distance you are from your screen and the size of your screen, because that will then give you as close to 1-to-1. And on my rig, my setup, what we're looking at here is as near as damn it 1-to-1 for me. Now I do have left and right mapped on here, so I can have a look in my mirrors if I want. But what's also worth picking up if you're racing like this, and it is perfectly possible to race with a view that is like this, some people find it a bit tricky at first, But for a lot of titles, you can either switch on-screen position indicators to warn you of cars around you. For Project Cars 2, there's an excellent app called Crew Chief, which acts as a spotter. There's also a built-in spotter within Project Cars 2. The first one didn't have it. Assetto Corsa has your position indicators. Gran Turismo Sport has your radar and a few other things as well. But this gives you the best, most natural view for what you're looking at. That, as I say, that's a look at how it is from Project Cars 2's point of view. So we're now going to swap over to a few other titles and have a look at those. These are all going to be track-based races we're looking at here. So that's Project Cars 2 done, and a good look at why it's important to get your field of view right. So what I'm going to look at next is we're going to move over and have a play around with Assetto Corsa. Okay, so here we are in Assetto Corsa. Now, one of the things that does differ with Assetto Corsa from Project Cars 2 is that in Project Cars 2, you're setting your cockpit view globally. So it is once set the same for all cars. That is, I must confess, actually a preference. I do prefer having it set that way myself. With Assetto Corsa, you have to set it on a car-by-car basis. Now, it does, if I just quit out of here a second and show you, it does have the ability to set a default there we go, default field of view, but the lowest it will go is 50 degrees, which for my screen setup, and keep in mind this is not on the horizontal now, this is on the vertical, is far too wide. What I actually need is something closer to around about 35. So we'll go and have a look at how you can then sort that out within Assetto Corsa. So it is a different way of measuring it, but the calculator I've linked to in the description will give you exactly the same. It shows you both. That's no problem at all. So you can play around with it to your heart's content and do whatever you want with it. But yeah, it doesn't really make any difference in all honesty. So here we are back in this view here, and you'll see I've got an option to adjust cockpit view, and what you can see here is I can change the view. So 35 or so is about right for this particular setup, or my particular setup, and Assetto Corsa. Again, you can narrow it right the way down, or you can open it right the way up. So I'll just set that back to 35, and again you've got the ability to move seat position. In fact, if anything, you've got more options within Assetto Corsa than you do within Project Cars 2, but left and right movement, it's not really that helpful, but the backwards, forwards, up, down, and adjusting the pitch are all exactly the same. As I say, within Assetto Corsa, you do have to go in and set it for every single car, which can be a bit of a pain, but there's not a massive car library, so it's not that bad. So Assetto Corsa, same as Project Cars 2, gets a big thumbs up in terms of the point of view settings. We can set stuff that works. We can set stuff that gives you a one-to-one view and allows you to get that accurate indicator of how elevation changes actually are, what they look like, and also how they work in practice in terms of corner angles, radiuses, etc. They're close to what they should be. So, as I say, big thumbs up for Project Cars 2 and Assetto Corsa in this regard. These are what I personally would consider the benchmarks. You need this kind of setup as a minimum. So we're now going to pop over to Gran Turismo Sport and have a look at that. Okay, so here we are with GTS, and we've got, this is a Mazda at Bathurst. So what I'm just going to look at is the options you get here, which are hidden away in detailed settings and adjust cockpit view. Now you get absolutely no option within GTS to adjust the actual field of view as a percentage in terms of, as a degree setting. You are locked in a setting which appears to be somewhere between about 70 and 80 degrees on a horizontal scale. So it's a fairly wide view, gives you a good sense of speed, gives you a reasonable view around it, but does flatten out elevations and does really show and throw you out in some corner radiuses. Bathurst is a track which does highlight this actually. Now you do have the ability to adjust your seating height, so you can change the seat height and you can change how far backwards or forwards you are. This is my preference for GTS. But yeah, with GTS there is no other options than that, so it's very simplistic from that point of view, which is a real shame because you can really tell the difference if you whack GTS onto PSVR, so you're looking at it in VR, and VR is always going to give you pretty much what you should be seeing in the real world. It makes a massive difference to the tracks. You know, there's a lot of tracks which have some quite significant elevation changes. So places like Brands Hatch, like Bathurst where we are now, like obviously the Nordschleife, Nürburgring, and in flat mode here, the default and fixed point of view within GTS really does it doesn't do the tracks any favours. It's not showing you what they are actually like and giving you a good indication of what the corner radiuses are like. So corner radiuses appear to be more open than they are, which can lead to you having to overcorrect or keep correcting when you get into corners. So it's not a good showing by GTS in this regard. They get some plus points for having limited VR mode, but you shouldn't have to spend that extra money to be able to get it when you're racing normally. You should be able to adjust the field of view. Okay, you just should. So not quite good enough there. Polyphony and GTS. So we'll move on and have a look at one more title, which is F1 2018. Okay, so here we are on F1 2018, and if we drop into the options and preferences, we can see that we've got some camera options in here, and I do like what they've done with F1 2018. There's a lot of options in here which are quite nice. So you can, for example, offset the camera view, angle it. So this is all around seating position more than anything else. So as you can see there, it's greyed out, but you can quite clearly see as I move these around, it's changing your position, so that's quite nice. You can adjust the angle, you can change mirror angles, you can add camera shake and camera movement, you can add look to apex, which I really like. Forgot to mention that earlier. Project Cars 2 has look to apex, F1 2018 has look to apex, Assetto Corsa and GTS don't have look to apex. One that is very specific to F1 2018 is the ability to hide the halo, which is quite nice because in reality you wouldn't, because of the way your eyes work, see it as a solid block. You'd actually, because of the way your eyes work, effectively look past and through it, so you wouldn't really see it. So the ability to remove it's quite nice. Now the interesting thing about F1 2018, and it's a little bit annoying, but at least they've put it in here, is you don't have a degrees setting either on a horizontal or a vertical scale for adjusting your field of view. You basically have a default which is set to 0, and you then have to kind of work out where you need to go to in order to get it. You've got a good range, and it does give you some idea, and I tend to run through for my setup about minus 0.5, and that I find gives me a good option, as you can see here, and it's pretty much the kind of field of view that I would expect based on what I've got set on other titles. So That's F1 2018. Overall, I like the options. It's got a good range of options in there. And, you know, we've looked here at 4 of the most common semi-serious or serious sims on PS4, and for 3 out of the 4 we've got some really good solid options to set up field of view to match your own personal rig, the size of your screen and the distance you're sitting from it. So, you know, top marks to Assetto Corsa, Project Cars 2 and F1 2018 for giving us these options. It is a little disappointing that we don't have any option for that at all within GTS. So there we go, that's a quick look at field view settings on the PS4 and its track-based racing titles. If you've got any questions or any comments, please do leave them down below. If you've enjoyed this or find it useful, throw a like up, and if you want to see more like this, please do subscribe away. Thanks very much. Bye.